The Roland SPD-SX is arguably the most popular drum sampling pad around. Drummers from all over the globe have been using this drum pad and its prior iteration, the SPD-S, for many years to integrate electronic sounds into an acoustic setup. Today I'll be taking a look at the SPD-SX in detail, looking at its core features, applications, and what to expect upon first use. And real quick, something that's different about this review when compared to others. This is my review after 5 years of use. I've used my pad all over the US in different clubs, theaters, outdoor venues. I have to say, it's held up and still performs great. So let me just give a brief overview of the SPD-SX. First off, it's one of the most used sampling pads available to drummers, featuring 3 effects engines, tons of great included sounds right out of the box, and 4 gigabytes of internal storage. It's Roland's most advanced percussion pad, featuring 9 velocity sensitive zones, allowing you to play samples or loops with ease. The sounds you import don't just have to be samples either, they can be full-blown backing tracks or loops, you name it. Now, the included samples with the SPD-SX are very usable, but I do love having the option to import my own samples via USB or by using Roland's Wave Manager software. It's nice to have the ability to import custom percussion, electronic sounds. For example, I've brought in sounds from instruments like the Simmons Claptrap and some of their big 80s sounding tom drums and loads of other samples. Programming kits is a simple and straightforward process, and the SPD-SX provides us with 100 kits to edit to our liking. So let me talk about the pros. First of all, with Roland, you get an excellent user experience. Changing kits is as simple as pressing either the plus or minus button on the front of the sampling pad. The kits load relatively fast, and I haven't had any problems with lag like I used to with the original SPD-S. You're not limited to changing kits with just the plus or minus button either. The top left and right shoulder pads on mine are actually programmed to change which kit I'm on. This is super useful, especially in a live setting. I find it's just much easier to use the shoulder buttons to change which song I'm on rather than using my fingers with the plus and minus. Obviously, in this situation, you're going to lose 2 of your pads though, so keep that in mind. I usually have a different sound configuration for each song in the set list, and the SPD-SX allows me to have different electronic or sampled sounds to match the album recording to the best of my ability. One of the added benefits of having different kits for each song is that the SPD-SX actually will act as a set list for your show. As you move through the set, you can name each kit the respective song title to know which song is coming next. So one of the most utilized ways that drummers use the SPD-SX in live settings today is, of course, with backing tracks. Now, this is not a debate whether or not bands should be using backing tracks or not. Rather, I'm just telling you that the SPD-SX works very well with digital audio workstations and playback systems. For our backing track setup, I needed something that allowed me to stop and start songs reliably. The SPD-SX was perfect for this application. Another problem that plagues a lot of sample pads on the market is something called crosstalk. Now, crosstalk is an issue where one pad will trigger another pad. So you might be playing pad 1 and pad 9 starts firing at the same time. This was a huge problem on my SPD-S. And fortunately, Roland has fixed all the issues. I've never had crosstalk issues with mine over the past 5 years that I've had it. And this is super important because this can be terrible if you are using a drum pad in a playback system. Just imagine that the stop and start pads you had set up had crosstalk problems. It would be a huge issue night after night playing shows. Real quick on the ins and outs, the SPD-SX features 2 analog ins, 2 analog outs, 2 sub-outs, a 1/4 inch headphone input, MIDI in and out, USB MIDI, a 1/4 inch foot switch, and 2 1/4 inch TRS trigger inputs for additional pads. Though they're not featured in any of the video I took for this, I use 2 extra Roland PD-85 pads, one to my right and one to my left. These 2 pads allow me to have access to sounds on the sampling pad without having to move all the way over to the unit, which typically sits to my right above the floor tom. One big downside about the SPD-SX is that it does not support a hi-hat controller. The FD8 would be the go-to choice for those looking to add one. Sadly, it won't function with the SPD-SX. For an application like this, you'll need something like the SPD-30, which has limited functionality in comparison. Let's talk about actually playing the SPD-SX. It feels fantastic. Compared to the SPD-S, the newer pad from Roland knocks it out of the park. The best way I can describe the feel is it's like you're playing a practice pad, like a real feel pad from Evans. And being that this video is 5 years after I initially bought my SPD-SX, I would not be shocked if Roland came out with a new sampling pad within the next year or two. I haven't seen any news or any rumors of anything like that, but it seems appropriate given that Alesis just released their Strike multi-pad last year. If there's one big con about these types of sampling pads, is that they're not totally ergonomic. The zones are a little close together, and it can take a slight adjustment to practice and become comfortable with the pad. There's more niche companies like Alternate Mode who have designed percussion pads like the Drum Cat, which are much more focused on playability. Okay, it's time for the elephant in the room, the motherboard issue. Many other drummers, and I included, have felt the pain of a failing SPD-SX. The problem? The power button no longer functions, and the SPD-SX refuses to turn on. When I've had this problem, I would frantically press the power button in hopes that it would eventually work and I won't miss my sound check. So far, it's worked in every case where I've had trouble. It just takes a few minutes to turn on. There's nothing worse than fearing a failing piece of hardware in a system so integral to a live performance. Maybe this is a lesson to keep things simple. It's unclear to me if Roland has ever addressed this recently or if they've worked out a quality control issue of the ones they're currently shipping, but it's a pretty big deal. I'm not saying it'll happen to you, but it's a valid concern for anyone considering the SPD-SX. Now, my power problem happened, I would say, in 2017 when we were touring a lot of small clubs, and the issue somehow just miraculously went away. And I can't really tell you what I did or what I didn't do, but for now it seems that my sampling pad is still functioning fine. So who is the SPD-SX for? For drummers who want to get a little bit more creative with sounds and samples, the electronic drum pads are perfect for this. Whether you choose the SPD-SX or the Strike multi-pad, you'll have a blast in the process of setting it up and playing it. I've been using them, like I said, this one in particular, for the last 5 years. I think they're really cool for drummers to add to their setup. Adding extra hits, claps, percussion, and other sounds to our live show made it way more fun and exciting to me as a performer, and hopefully to the audience as well. If you're on the fence, just head down to your local music store and ask to play around on one. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how much fun you can have using the Roland SPD-SX. So wrapping up, I still think out of all the drum sampling pads available on the market, the Roland SPD-SX is still hands down the best one you can pick. Sure, there's lots of options out there now, but I'm still happy and thankful that I initially went with this pad more than 5 years ago. That said, I'm curious to know what you think about the SPD-SX, and if you use other sampling pads, let me know which ones. I'm curious to know what you like about those pads versus this one, and how you're integrating them into your own setup. So that about wraps up my 5-year review of the Roland SPD-SX. Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video, and I'll see you in the next one.